In the text above, I have proposed several definitions of conflict. Each of them contains interesting elements to characterize conflict. We will retain 5 of them. First, conflicts are human processes that appear between 2 or more parties. These parties can represent individuals, groups, societies, or even nations. The greater the number of parties involved in the conflict, the more complex the conflict. Second, conflict arises when these parties are interdependent. Interdependence means that the parties need each other to achieve their objectives. We will return to the concept of interdependence in the next section of this course. Third, these interdependent parties are said to perceive a divergence between them. As we will see later, the notion of perception is essential in conflict process. Conflict does not arise if a divergence exists, but is not perceived. Just as conflict can arise if the parties perceive a divergence, even though it does not exist in reality. Fourth, for conflict to occur, the objectives, goals, and interests of the parties must be seen as incompatible. When the divergence between the parties is seen as involving interests or objectives that are ultimately compatible, conflict is unlikely to emerge. It is the perception of incompatibility that creates the conflict. Finally, the 5th characteristic is that conflict is associated with cognitive, emotional, and behavioral reactions. This means that how we think, feel, and act is affected by the conflict situation. Having stated this characteristic, I think it is important to emphasize that neither the definition I gave in the introduction nor the characteristics I have just mentioned highlight the important role played by emotions in conflict episodes sufficiently. Indeed, emotions, often negative ones, are omnipresent in conflicts, and the communication between the parties involved is not always easy. Authors like Jones and Butker go even further and define conflict emotionally, stating that to recognize that we are in conflict is to recognize that we have been emotionally upset. This is why any conflict management strategy has to take into consideration the management and regulation of parties' emotions.